Yes, you have to pull up close to you and speak into them, please.
And make sure it's green. Green means go, red means no.
Okay, so it's 6:30. We'll call the meeting to order with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we open the meeting with the public forum. If there's somebody who would like to speak about anything, that we have one person. So, Deborah Neal, I don't know if you'd rather you either speak to us now, or wait until after the presentation of items you want to talk about.
Hey, this is Deborah Neal. I live on 525 Oakdale Street, right between Elm Creamery and all state official my work for doorstep. I just wanted to address what is shaped to be the initial proposal request for rezoning. When I and all our neighbors along that stretch of Oakdale bought our homes, single family residential, we of course wanted to stay single family residential. That's what our neighborhood is. I think if we would follow the proposal to convert residential properties to commercial, I think it would be a huge step in the wrong direction. I really think it would be an injustice to this town and also to us as individuals. And I think if any one of you could just imagine a lot across the street from you, on the stretch of them, was converted to commercial, to be either developed or to have a whole lot of parking right there in front of you, and who knows what else in the future could possibly come. I don't think it's anything anybody would really find desirable. And I just hope that as you consider whatever steps you take moving ahead, that you would consider what the residents really want, and especially those of us who would be most greatly impacted, what it would do to our situation, our living situation, our investment, our happiness on Oakdale Street, which is great, I can tell you. And I just want to thank you for your time and your attention.
Thank you. All right. First thing we need to do as board is approve our minutes from November 10th, 2020. The last meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now we have
my name is Brad Reeves, and I serve as the town plan. The case we have before you tonight is a rezoning request and a preliminary site plan request in front of you. This is for the Downtown Windermere Properties Project, 219-12, this case number, and it's located at the northeast corner of Main Street and 6th Avenue, the location. So I'm going to walk you a little bit through what the process is, walk you through kind of background, and then review comments for it, and you can collect things here that will provide additional information. So the first, next week, Robert. So the first part I want to go through is what the process is for approving development and permitting development plan. So it is, I will say out front, it is a process, very close. There's basically four steps into the process under your code. The first is pre-application, where the meeting with the town staff. This is what I did with them back in 2019 to discuss the project for the pre-application. Once that goes through, they just submit their application, we went through several reviews, and then we get to what's called the conceptual plan review. That's the ERB they recall back in October of 2020, we did send out, the town sent out the plans, the concept plans for individual PRB member comment, which is required of the code. We did get back approximately 4 or 5 comments back on that, which we then did provide to the applicant on that conceptual plan review. We did get those comments that were provided. At that point, what they then did was go back, revise the plans based on the comments that received, and submit now where we are tonight with what's called a preliminary development. So that's what you have before you tonight is a preliminary development. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. If this preliminary development plan gets approved by the development review board and also by town council, the final step in the process is the final development plan. And those will be future public hearings again with the development review board and the town council. So where we are tonight is at the preliminary. So it's important to realize there's still another step after this before anything can happen on that property. A little background of this request. Originally, when this was originally submitted back in June 2019, the original submittal had a third building that was inconsistent with the downtown master plan. They also were proposing some amendments to the comprehensive plan. After several reviews and discussions with the applicant, they did drop that part. So they removed that third building. They removed the request for the comprehensive plan amendment. So the plan that you have before you this evening is intended to be fully consistent with your downtown master plan requirements. What's the purpose of next week? What's the purpose of it? So in your code, what it requires is properties that are located in the town center overlay. And I'll show you that now in just a moment. And that's adopted in your comprehensive plan. It's consistent with your town center design. Master plan was done by the town several years ago. Any property in there that goes to development is required to obtain the PUD zone. So that's why this is coming before you. This property is within the overlay district. It has to obtain the PUD to develop. As I say, the second bullet, as part of the PUD, they can also submit a preliminary development. And what this does for them, it doesn't give them approval to build it. But what it does do, if it gets approved by the town council, it puts the zoning in place. It gives them the entitlement, the proper zoning to move forward with the final development. So if this is approved, again, they don't get approval to do anything, but they do have the zoning in place to move forward with the next step of the process. And the very important point here at the bottom is all development must be consistent with all the design standards within the town center design guidelines that were adopted by the town back in 2004, 2006. So that addresses issues such as building location, parking, buffering, what the building facade look like, et cetera. So there are the standards that they have to meet as part of that. Exclusive. So again, I think the approval of the on the development. What will be going forward to the town council, depending on the direction of the RV, and any comments or concerns or conditions you may place, will be a development agreement that'll go forward to the town council to then approve as part of the rezoning. That will put in those limitations or restrictions that the town, that you all feel, the town council feels are appropriate for this project. And then finally, if these are approved, there will be a final development plan. That'll be then a fully engineered plan where we have all the details of development. That'll come back to the DRB for your review and approval or conditions or deny. It'll come back to you for another review, and it'll also go to the town council for their final review. So again, this has another separate review going forward if this were to be approved as presented tonight. Next, please. So the first part, what I need to make sure everybody understands that the town did adopt a downtown master plan. I know the DRB is aware of that, but I think it's important for the residents to know this as well. So in 2004, 2006, the town through the process of developed a downtown master plan that identified how do we want to see our downtown development into the future. What that master plan did, and that's what you have on the screen here in front of you, it identified areas for development within this designated area. The area surrounded in blue, that's the block where this property is located. So it's actually located on the left-hand side at the corner of 6th and Main. What that shows is that on the frontage of those lots, or on that block, the front of Main Street, that's the building zone. That's where the buildings have to be located. is along Main Street, along I'll call that the west side of the lots. The back side, the lots that front along Oakdale, so on the west, got my west and east mess up. On the east side, along Oakdale, that is limited to only the parking. So parking, stormwater retention, and then of course the buffering that's there. So this is in place today. This has been in place for many years. This is the first project you have before you. Well, there was one way back in 2006-07. This is the first project before you in current times that is moving forward with a project within this downtown overlay. So they have to be consistent with this alignment and arrangement. What you can also see there, it limits access on East 6th Avenue to in and out, and access off of East 5th Avenue, and there's no access off of Oakdale. Next, please. So this is the town's future land use map that's part of your comprehensive plan. So again, what's important to see here, this is where the town has adopted that overlay district within your comprehensive plan. So this property located at the corner of Main and 6th. It's in the inset map, it's actually behind Mr. Withers. It's zoomed in there. Thank you, sir. And you can see there it is within the district. I will say, because I know this is something of a concern, you see that there is a single family land use underneath the overlay district. That is correct. But how an overlay district works is that the overlay district lies on top of that underlying land use. So it provides the opportunity for a developer to move forward with a development consistent with the design guidelines and the standards of that master plan with that underlying single family development or land use classification. And that's why it has to go through the PUD. That's why it has these review processes it has to go through. So it does have the ability to do it even though it's a single family land use, but because the comprehensive plan has the overlay on it, that is why it's able to move forward. That overlay has been on there for many, many years. That is nothing that's new. That has been there for many, many years. Next, please. So a little bit more about the project location. So as I said, this is at the northeast corner of Main Street and 6th Avenue. That's the survey that was submitted with the application. It's a little bit over 2 acres. Again, something that's important here, that the access to the site is only off East 6th Avenue and East 5th Avenue. East 6th also is only a right in, right out only. East 5th would be a full movement on it, but there is no access on Oakdale Street. The only thing that will be along Oakdale Street will be the required 20-foot buffer with a 6-foot high wall and with landscaping on the outside of the wall. So on the Oakdale side of this, it'll be buffered with a wall and landscaping. There will not be buildings, there will not be access points onto Oakdale Street. Next, please. I know you can't read all these little things, but I'm gonna hit the highlights. So what I'm gonna just go over with you quickly here this afternoon or evening is we did a review based on the PUD requirements. And the ones that are red are the ones I'm gonna hit on. You don't have to read it, I can give you what the issues are. I will also say, before I get into this, I have had some of these issues resolved in discussions with the applicant and the representative between the time we submitted this and tonight. So where that has happened, I will let you all know where some of those issues have been resolved. So the first item under the PUD requirements, so these are things that aren't necessarily requirements for development, but these are what are requirements or what are to be shown within the PUD plans. One of the requirements is showing a tree survey that shows the tree 6 inches or greater and what the impacts to those trees would be. What was submitted to the town with the application was an older survey. It was a 2006 survey that had the trees. The tree impact plan that was submitted with the application was also the old tree impact plan with the project that was being proposed in 2006, 2007. So it doesn't match with what's being proposed today, the tree impact plan. I do understand, and they can address it when they present, they are working with an arborist now. They will have an updated plan that would be provided as part of the final development plan when that would come back to you. So that is being addressed, but in the preliminary development plan, what we have currently on record is outdated. The next part is the PUD requirements of the traffic study can be required for the project. So we did require them to do a traffic study, given the sensitivities of traffic in the town and in this location. So they did complete a traffic study for this project. It was completed by the Loop Transportation Engineering Consultants. And this was done in December of 2019. This was also reviewed by the town's consultant, Kimley Horn, who is the town's engineering consultant. They reviewed this traffic study. They actually worked with the consultant doing the traffic study to confirm the methodology on the study and also reviewed the final product of the study. So the final result of that study was, Kimley Horn recommended and the applicant has agreed to deal with traffic for this, going through this area, that they would need to install a right-hand turn lane into their project, and it would be on their property. So they would have a right turn lane, so traffic going into the project, again, off of 6 is only right in, right out, that they would be taken out of the queue of traffic and have a turn lane to get in to help relieve any concerns with congestion. The other project that, the town is looking at is redoing the roundabout here at Main and 6th. And so they are looking at alternatives to make some improvements there as well. So it was Kimley Horn's recommendation that with this right turn lane, that this was sufficient for transportation with this request. One of the areas where they're asking for a waiver, and the PUD process does allow an applicant to ask for waivers for provisions within the PUD. One of the requirements in the PUD process is they're supposed to provide 1-foot contours of the property. They've asked not to have to provide this at this time, as we all know the property is extremely flat, and that was not provided. We have no objection or concern with that. It really won't tell us much at this point with the project. The next area was gross floor area. What you see in our staff report is we did have a hard time coming up with a consistent number for the floor area of the buildings. And this is an area of issue that actually I resolved right before this meeting tonight with talking with the applicant. The correct number for these buildings is 21,750 square feet. That's between the two buildings. That number is used in their analysis when they did their parking analysis. So this is not a number that's not a good number. It is part of the parking analysis. So they will be revising their plans to make sure that all the references to square footages and the buildings reflect that 21,750. They can confirm that when they come up and give their presentation as well. With the floor area ratio, they did provide what the maximum is, but they didn't give us in their application what they are. But again, that they did provide that to us after we did our staff report, and their floor area ratio based on the 21,750 square feet, and with the 2.17 acre site, it comes out to 23%. So it's well within the FAR limitation of the site, which is 40%. So they are fine with the floor area ratio as they're proposing it. Building height, as you know, and it's another comment, they did not provide us any facade drawings of the proposed buildings. However, they did indicate in their application, and they have now also confirmed that building heights are only 35 feet. And that is the standard within the downtown design district, and that's the standard town-wide actually for everything, is 35 feet. So they will not exceed the 35 feet. The building that's on the south side along Main Street, a portion of that building will be 2 stories, but it'll still meet the 35 height limitation. So they have made that commitment. With setbacks, we did our best to determine that they do meet the setbacks that are required. It is hard because of the drawing. It was difficult to then make out property lines. But based on the best information we can look at, it does appear that they meet them. It was just hard to be absolutely certain. But again, that could be something that could be fleshed out more as part of when they come back with the final development plans. Next, please. Parking spaces. This is another area where we have come to somewhat of a response here. So with the parking spaces, initially our issue was the they were saying they had 87, we were counting 85. It turned out that in the digital plan we were looking at, there was a bank of 3 spaces that we weren't seeing, or 2 spaces we weren't seeing. So there are 87 parking spaces shown on their plan that they are proposing. So the issue that there were 85, 87, that is no longer applicable. There are 87 being proposed on the site. However, our other concerns or comments are still applicable. One is they're not showing currently the handicap spaces. They will be required to provide handicap spaces. Generally, that standard is 1 per 25 spaces. So in this case, it would be roughly 4 spaces based on the 85 parking space count. So that will somewhat impact, that will impact their parking because those spaces are larger than a standard parking space. And the other issue with the parking was when we were scaling out the parking spaces, some of the parking spaces, they weren't accurate. They weren't accurate. And for an example, there's a parking bank on the east side of the property. There's, I think, 4 spaces there. When you look at the width of them, they range anywhere from 7 feet to 10 feet. But again, that could be something that could be very, cleaned up and clarified and be correct, because it'll have to be correct when they come back to the final development plan. I will say though, the other check we did, if we measure the overall length of that bank and divide it by the 9.5 feet, which is the required space, they can fit those number of space in that area. So it's just an issue of how they show the spaces. But again, that could be cleaned up when they come back. With the landscape buffer, so they do show that they are going to have a landscape buffer. They do show the area for the landscape buffer. They do show the wall that's required to go along Oakdale. However, they don't provide any detail of what will be in that landscape buffer, the vegetation, how that will be landscaped. That typically would be provided. Again, they are committing and saying they will meet that standard, they will meet that requirement, and will provide that when they come back with the final development plan. Let me see. So the next one is again a little bit about traffic. Just again to reiterate, they did do the traffic study, and as a result of that, they will be putting in a right turn lane into their project to help with traffic in that area. Let's see what else we want to hit. The next one is related to the building facades. So the plan development requirement said that they're supposed to provide sketches of the proposed building facade of the project. They have asked for a waiver from that requirement. So they have asked for the waiver to not provide that. However, they have made commitments within their application that they will be fully compliant with those design standards. They will be reviewed as part of the final development plan. And they did provide a sheet, showing what the design standards are in the master plan. They showed examples, the facades of the new town facilities, of the new building here on West 5th. So they did not provide us the facades, but they do say that they will meet the facades, and you will have the opportunity to review those as part of the final development plan. The next issue is regarding the septic. One of the concerns that we have is the current site plan that they have before you, or the preliminary plan that they have before you, it doesn't account for the septic drain field. Their response to that is they will account for the final development plan. The concern, and just so everybody is aware, so for the applicant to be aware, when they get to the point of putting in the septic and designing the septic and siting it, it will most likely have an impact on the square footage of the building that can go there, and most likely reduce it, because it will take up part of their parking that they're showing. So there is a very strong likelihood that once they bring in the septic and do the analysis for where the septic, particularly the drain field, will go, it may reduce the size of the buildings that are being proposed. So how this would move forward in terms of if this were to be approved, and how we would put it forward and say is the 21,750 would be the maximum buildings that could occur. It can always be less based on the final site conditions and issues that are there. So that is a concern, and we wanted to just make sure that everyone was aware that, by not planning for it now, when they come back and plan for it, it could have an impact on the building sizes that are out there being proposed. And then finally, they are asking for waivers for the topo and for the facades, which is allowed. They're allowed to ask for that as part of this process. The DRB does not have to recommend approval to allow that to happen, but they are allowed to ask for it, and you are allowed to recommend to allow that to move forward. Next, please. In terms of the actual town center design guidelines, I'm not going through all this now. Most of what you see on this table are things that they are not showing us, and that's basically related to the facade and also to the specifics of the screen wall of the landscaping within the buffer. But in all cases, what they are saying in their application, that they will meet the requirements of the downtown master plan and the overlay district and what they will be, and then that will be provided as part of the final development plan. So we don't have the ability to say to you all this evening that yes, they are compliant with all of those because we don't have the information, but we can say they are committed to bringing it back in the final plan to be compliant for you all to review and approve. Or not approve if you don't find it compliant. In terms of the areas where we can take a look at, one of the requirements in the town center design guidelines is the buildings need to be 120 feet from the buffer or from off of Oakdale. Again, pushing it to the front, pushing it to Main, they do meet that standard. They do meet that requirement. Also, it calls for an 80% building frontage requirement along Main Street. They do meet that. Now, they do have some areas where they set back to try to protect trees along the front, but they are compliant in terms of the building location where they're placing the buildings. It is, they are compliant with those standards of the design guidelines. Again, the specifics of the facade, of the landscaping, we don't have that at this point, but it would come forward as part of the final development. Next, please, Robert. All right, so my planner, Sarah, she went to town on here and kind of try to label where we had the concerns and make it clearer for folks. So the two buildings in the front, you can see where she had marked up, that's where we just had, inconsistencies with those square footages. But again, as I said, I confirmed tonight that is 21,750. So those will be updated to be correct. One of the issues that we had was on the building on the right, or on the south side. We did not pick up that was a two-story building. So that was where that discrepancy was. But where that, from what I've been told, where that X is on that building, that portion will be 2 stories. So that will be updated to reflect the 21,750. Just to the north of the X on the building, that's that banquet parking that did not show up in the plan we reviewed, but in the hard copies of the plan, it is there. So there are the 87 as they state that there are. You can see she actually counted the 85 that are on there. The one arrow on the right-hand side that points to the entry, that is just calling out the right in, right out on 6th Avenue. That is required. And just to the north, east of there is pointing to where the right turn lane would be installed coming into the property. Now, those will still need to be fully engineered. Those are not engineered entrances. Those will need to be engineered as part of that final development plan. The other areas that you just see around the outside is just indicating we had a hard time locating the property lines. But, based on the best information, the best that we could tell, that appeared to be the property line. The buffering, as is required in the land development code or in the town center guidelines, it is going to be provided on the property, not within the right of way. So that will be there. So that just gave just a visual representation of some of the issues that we had as we went through our review. Next, please. So this is the tree impact plan. Again, you can't read it, but that's okay. I just wanted to point out to folks, the plan that was submitted for that was from 2006 with the proposed Main Street Shops project. But again, the applicant in a response, and I believe they'll say today, they are updating that plan. There will be an updated plan part of the final development plan. Part of it. Next, please. This is the sheet that the applicant provided related to the facades. Again, as I said earlier, basically what they've done is they just provided the excerpts out of the design guidelines. Those are the top 2 images. What the requirements are, and then provided the elevations of the town facilities and of the new building proposed here on West 5th Avenue. Just so everybody is aware, the town facilities and the West 5th Avenue building are not within the town center overlay district. They're outside of it. However, as you may recall, the requirement for the West Fifth Avenue building was to be developed consistent with those guidelines. And I believe the town has also done that as part of their town facilities. Next, please. The final slide I have is just in terms of our public response. So we did send out the notices to properties. We received 7 in support. You can see the whys, 8 in opposition. And we also received 2 undecided. And the undecided were they felt there wasn't sufficient information for them to make an opinion at this time. So that was the response that we received through our public noticing. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I can answer any questions for you now, or the applicant's here to provide their presentation.
Anybody have questions for that?
Any questions from the audience?
We'll get to that. Thank you. Sure, yeah. And, the whole series of things are concerning. Obviously, not having data at this level means that they're basing everything on final development. And, that's extremely risky from their point of view. That's maybe their choice. Maybe at least a survey or something. But, one of the things that concerns me, especially that last slide you showed, is all the numbers. Neil just commented while we have parking across the street from us. In 2004, we developed a plan for this entire district, and it did show parking in that zone on the east side of the block. And that's been approved since 2004. So what we need to do is make sure that the residents, understand that this is working within a plan that was approved in 2004. And for those people who weren't here, in 2004, we went through almost a year of town meetings and discussions. We had a table that we were all through drawings, we did all sorts of things to come up with these plans. And the design scheme. So it wasn't a small task, we had a tremendous amount of community input. So what we really need to do is to get that in the hands of these people so they understand that's the basis of what we're going from. Not that Mr. Hall and team just created this out of thin. This is the basis. And that buffer and the wall was approved in 2004. Now, soon we could go back and revisit what so I don't want to mislead people in this meeting. Second thing I was curious about was the parking versus trees. We don't have a tree survey that's in we don't have a tree count you can read. Well, we don't know. So not only will septic affect parking, but so will trees. Now, the septic doesn't have, if you've got to take off a lot of site from septic, that doesn't affect your parking. We have talked about back when we did that overlay of allowing reduced parking accounts to save major trees. Since we don't know where the major trees are, we can't even address that with the applicant at this time. When we get to that point, and we say, oh, we will save these trees, we're in the parking lot. We do have, I think it's in the guidelines, we can do some reduction of the parking.
Yes, and to that point, initially the application did request to do that reduce to save trees. You can take from the 4 to 1,000 and reduce it to 3 to 1,000 for the guideline. The reason though we had to have them take it out was just because we didn't have enough information to know whether trees would be affected or not.
The next question in terms of parking that I have, and I know this came up with the Kevin Zeus plan, was they had no concept of how to do a truck
into the site, and out of the site. And they had a restaurant, they had commercial. And as we know from just the Dixon Cream property, they have a big truck that pulls alongside on the Fifth that unloads and all of their foods and services. I assume in the restaurants, on this side, will also have to have service, truck, dumpster, pickup. The big dumpster pickups are not small trucks. As their traffic engineer or Emily Horn reviewed trucks getting in and out of the site.
It was not because the plan that we have before us is not an engineering plan. It's a concept plan. So for them to do like a turning radius analysis like this, it really wouldn't be worthwhile to do on something at this level. Because it's not accurate, but it can be designed to meet that. They are proposing a loading zone interior of the property, so it wouldn't be stacking out. So that would absolutely be part of that engineering. But I can say, correct your question, no. They might want to not review it based on whether trucks can get around the proposed access based on.
The big issue we had in this plan was trucks couldn't get out on the Fifth. Okay, that was a block. They couldn't make the turn on the roundabout there. The Fifth is actually a very narrow road, so they couldn't get from the site to Fifth. Now we've got them doing a right only out on the Sixth, which means every truck has to go down that roundabout. I don't even know if they can turn around in something. I do think before we approve any parking, any density, we really need to know how they're dealing with on-site truck traffic. And I think you can do it. This concept plan they submitted was 5 days of work. If it had been 2 days worth of work, you figure out how to get the trucks in. So that would be a comment I had on the parking. My other comment is, I know they're saying that we can do this all in the final plan. Even going back to Mr. Zeus, he produced rendering after rendering different plans. And we had a whole town in here saying, no, we don't like that, we like this, and he came back and we did it. What I would hate to do is get down in a situation where they say, oh, we're doing a rendering of the new town facility, where they look like that. That's not even an issue, not even on the plan. So I think they're making an extreme gamble. People like Mrs. Niemeyer saying not a chance in my neighborhood. And the town, creates a real problem with their final review. Instead of giving us something now, that we can say, yes, this works, we don't. It would seem much more beneficial to them that they follow at least the guidelines of saying, here's the type of elevation. You couldn't even tell whether it's a 2-story building in the plan to do. That's not even acceptable. You had to go and meet with them and find out that was something. You got to respond. So I don't think they produced a plan that actually works. It doesn't have septic, doesn't have trucks, doesn't have trees, doesn't have building levels on there. So I think they're asking for an extreme gamble on their part. Because once you produce all these plans in detail, suddenly you redo them then, you've got a lot more headaches in redoing them now. And you're asking for simple diagrams as opposed to engineered plans. So the one question that I have for Mr. Hall or the developer was, Jim, can I address you?
They do have a presentation prepared. They have a presentation prepared.
Okay, I like that. I think we're ready for that. We have any other questions for that? I think I'm hoping in the presentation we get more explanation as to why it's really complete, because Brad is unable to provide that. So, please go ahead.
leadership team for the property. I've introduced Jim, introduced myself. Doing this around Central Florida for a long time. Transportation was done by Tony Luke. He's been doing it around town a bit longer. And then we brought in the foremost arborists in from Gainesville to Fort Myers, West Palm Beach, Joe Sandman, 55 years of experience. And we've been the ones collaborating putting this plan together. Next, please. We've already been through this. You know, there's 8,000 square feet of building on the property today, and it's 2.17 acres. And as Brad has mentioned, everyone's mentioned, it's in the downtown overlay district, the town center design guidelines for the sway. Next. So if you remember back to the very first slide, it said Z19-20. And that Z stands for zone. This is not a plan that gives us any ability to develop anything. The number 2 is taken right out of the town center guidelines. We see the underlined red. Approval of this plan does not authorize any development activity. None. So what we're talking about today is trying to get to a point where we can take the concepts and the things that we put together to pretty, this has been a bumpy road, which is okay. And we've gotten to a point where we know about how many parking spaces we have. We have A7. Could it change a little bit? Sure. We have 21,750 square feet. Does that match up? Does it all fit within the building envelope? Yes, it does. So what we were looking for with this Z1920 is to set those limits. This is the absolute maximum you could ever have on the property. And why? We just think it's really premature to go and spend money on facades and engineering and geotechnical when we don't know if we have 21,750 square feet. We might have 18. And what really, particularly for the septic thing, and Brad can argue, I think I'm going to be active with this, is we didn't, for the PDP, we didn't have to show the whole drain field and how it all works. We had to come up with what the flow was. And the flow then really comes from one use, and one use alone. An office building, it's like a house. You know, a retail store, it's like a house. If you have food and beverage, that's going to drive the whole septic need. And so until we know we have 21,750, 18,000, get to the market with what the food and beverage is going to be, to go and really figure out to the nth degree how all that stuff is going to work, it's just premature. It costs thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to do it on a whim. And the examples of Kevin Zeus, he drew and drew and drew and drew, and he didn't get anything. So what we're trying to do is follow Z1920 and get some limits on where we can go, and then try to show y'all that from the comprehensive plan, when you're doing a zoning plan, there's 2 questions. Is it consistent with the comp plan? And is it compatible with the neighborhood? So can we go to the next slide? We've asked for these 2 waivers. But what we've told Brad, what we've told everyone we talked to, we have tried to do everything within our brains and our ability to make this consistent with the comp plan. That's an absolute. The comp plan is the foundation development of the town of Windermere and every other municipality in the state of Florida. You have to match the comp plan. You can't get a waiver. You can't get a pass. You can't get out of jail free. You must meet the comp plan. And if you meet the comp plan, those 2 questions, is it consistent and is it compatible, are answered. Next slide. This is what we're trying to create. A mixture of non-residential uses. Not all one type, a mixture, some retail, continuation of some office use that's already on a property, and we'd like to add food and beverage. So what we'd like, and if you think of this, those three buildings that have been there starting since 1955, and the last one was built in 1974. The uses have changed over time. They're not all the same things that have been there all that time. And what we need to do is then design the site, and particularly design the architecture, so that a use in 20 years could switch and comfortably fit in the exact same building, the exact same facade. And the way to do that is to follow the design standards of the town center design guidelines. And if we follow those, then we're being consistent with the comp plan, we're following the code, and we're doing what the town with that plan from 17 years ago set out to do. Next. So that is the purpose of why the town center design guidelines were to promote diverse but compatible pedestrian-friendly architecture. And there's guidelines, and we've committed 37 times that we will meet those guidelines. Create a sense of place. We'll get to that. I mean, Windermere just has this wonderful sense of place. We have to preserve that and enhance that. We don't want any prohibited storefronts that look like a shopping mall. We'll get to that in a minute. We don't have any monolithic building facades. That's not our intent. Signage will follow all the standards, and landscaping, the landscaping will be, again, completely in keeping with the history and town of Windermere. But again, if we really don't know what we have, how can we get down to the detail of where is there an azalea and where is there a Orion? We just need some more confidence from Z1920 to get to where we're going. Next, please. So there's the same pictures, and we completely concur with Mr. Cornelius that we're on the left, and the buildings have to go along Main Street. The white space is where the parking and our dumpster goes, and where our loading zone goes, and the stormwater goes, and in the buffer, the green, we stay out of it, and in fact, we build a 72-inch wall, 6-foot wall, which is shown on the plans. That's what the comp plan says to do. That's what we fully and completely intend to do. Next slide, please. So there it is. This is the page from the comp plan, from our application, that shows the Main Street frontage is where you're allowed to put a building. That's on the bottom right. There's a line that comes right across, and that's the line of the lot distance. The lots above that are the current single-family lots that would have front, that do front, and that will no longer front on Oakdale. And so that goes in the exact same place. And we have the landscape buffer on the south and the east. We have a right-in, right-out that we've agreed to with the town that will come in off 6th. And we'll have full access that comes in from 5th. So that completely comports with the comprehensive plan and the town center design guidelines. Next. Okay, here are the guidelines for what happens in this area in the back. And this is exactly, we followed this to a T, that if you look at the bottom left, it shows the 20-foot buffer, it shows the wall, it shows landscaping. We're good with all that. We want to make this as fine a development as the town of Windermere has ever seen. And the parking is going to meet the size of the parking spaces, and it does. I mean, there are some complaints about each little line drawn for a parking space, but if you took from island to island, and the islands are the right width, there's a specified width. If you measure in between those, the exact right number of parking spaces fit in there. So the 87 spaces we concur are the 87 spaces. We'll have the 20-foot buffer, and we'll have the 6-foot wall. Yeah, completely in compliance. Next. And there's a picture again. You can see that there's the line where buildings have to stop and the buildings stop. There's the loading zone on the left of the red rectangle. If you go straight in from 6th Street, you see the little angle that's at the kind of the middle of the parking. That's the dumpster that a truck can come in off from 6th, pick up the load, back up, right in its drive out, and go out and then exit the site onto 5th Street. So the dumpsters, and we're here to tell you that that loading zone will in fact work, and it's about 60 feet long. So even a semi truck could sit there. Next, please. Okay, now we're getting into the facade conditions. And there really isn't a lot in the town center design guidelines on facade. There's no called out style, which is almost probably a legal issue to try to do that as a municipality. And what you have is, it says you have to have a base, which is the first floor. Then you have to have a body. If you have a second floor, it's base, body, cap, base, body, top. And we're going to follow that exactly. And then there's the, most of the, what we call the public realm, where the people walk, the public realm, that's already there. And in front of the Realty building, there's 4 mature oaks that if we were actually to put the building on that 0-foot building setback, we would kill those trees. So that's why we have voluntarily set the buildings back to save the trees. We have also put this weird notch, you'll see in a minute, we put this weird notch in the northern building so we can save that oak tree. So let's just talk about the tree survey. It was done in 2006, it's 14 years old. The trees in question are 42 inches wide. I don't think there's any new 42-inch trees since 2006. I don't think there's any new trees since 2006. They're the trees. And we're going to talk about 2 trees in the parking lot area. But the rest, we're saving like 20 mature oak trees with this development. We're saving 4 on the Main Street frontage. Actually, there's another one, but some of the other ones are farther away from the buildings, and it really isn't, we're not saving them. They will be just preserved for the way it's done. We're saving the one in the little courtyard, and then we're saving like 8, 9, 10 along 6th Street. We're saving like another 8, 9, 10 along Oakdale. So it's not like trees we're ignoring, but we'll get to these 2 big ones in the middle in a minute. So that's the amount of facade, that's half the facade information that you have to deal with to try to come up with all these standards and come up with something that you don't even know if you have 21,750 feet tonight. How can you draw a building if you don't know how many square feet you have? Next. Okay, this is a blow up of the buildings. On the far left, you can see not many retailers are going to want to have that cutout in their building, but that's what we're committing to. We would love to save that tree and create this pedestrian courtyard that would tie right into the Main Street pedestrian walkways and get back to the parking lot. And it's also like over 20 feet wide. So could like uses spill out there, like on a Saturday, someone could put their wares out there and do it. You could like have a little, if you were doing some type of cooking demonstration, it could happen in there. And it's underneath the tree. There's the 4 trees on Main Street. And if you see that grid symbol that we've drawn with, that comes from Joe Samnick, our arborist. It's like, if you're going to do this, you need to keep away from those trees. And you need to put in some type of paving that isn't going to cut off all the air and all the water from the roots of these trees that could be 150 years old. So we're showing that there's going to be pavers. So it is much more sensitive to the health of these trees that have been there longer than I've been alive.
You sure about that?
I'm getting old, dude. I'm getting old. So, I mean, I think from a hyper-technical level, we actually may need a waiver for this, because the building setback in the town center design guideline says 0. But that would be completely counterproductive to what we're trying to achieve. The other place where we're not meeting the 0 is because of the roundabout work, and it's not all the design work is done. We've shown the sidewalk, the future sidewalk for the uses that will occur on 6th Street within the building envelope. They're on the property. So you don't have to worry about a right-of-way need. We heard that no one really wanted to do a taking of property from this property to try to fix the 6th Street and the roundabout. So we just said, okay, we'll back up. We just backed up. And so the sidewalk is actually on the subject property. Again, that was a small consent to the town. Next. So we're back onto this. This is a building placement, this whole 0 setback thing. If you look at the one of the town's drawing, bottom left, at the one on the right, it actually, both of them actually say, go ahead and break the buildings up and do this courtyard connection thing, which is exactly what we've shown in the site plan, that there will be this strong connection to get from the street to go through an area big enough that could actually, things could spill out onto them for activities or sales, that then get back to the parking that's in the appointed place from the comprehensive plan to put the parking. We don't have any buildings that are 50 feet wide. That's the other standard in the design guidelines. None of the buildings are 50 feet wide. Actually, the building on the south, at the corner, we were hoping and just thought that would make the most sense for the food and beverage to kind of anchor that corner. And then the rest of that building is broken into 20-foot increments. But if we go to the next slide, that's the totality of your facade standards. And actually, we've seen the one on the right. The one on the left, when the purpose, at the very beginning, we talked about the purpose of these guidelines was to not look like a shopping mall. Well, the one on the left says you have to break everything into 20-foot components. Well, if you go to a shopping center, all their retail is 20-foot components. So to me, they just seem to run counter to each other. You don't, and have 3 different, if that's what somebody wants, 3 completely different architectural styles next to each other, then we can facilitate that. But we thought, and as Mr. Cornelius said, even though those 2 projects, the new town facilities and the brew pub on 5th, aren't in the district, they were held to conform to the district standards. That's why we added them in, because as you get these 2 buildings come up, they're going to be near-term buildings. There hasn't been a new building on Main Street in, I don't know, I don't live here. Y'all have lived here. It's been a long time. So you have 2 new buildings coming up. You have this building, which has a wonderful aesthetic. And so to try to complement and be consistent with that architecture. So now the town of Windermere's little downtown, which is constrained by the comp plan, it only can be like 2 blocks big. It now will actually start to have consistent complementary architecture. Next. So there's the new town facilities. Those are in our application, and we will try to complement, model, be consistent with those. Next. There's the brew pub. I think this is interesting because if you look at the town hall on the right, you have a little portico that you walk in from the street. You see, it got mimicked on the brew pub. So there's already something happening there, that there's this consistency and compatibility that's coming from your next 2 buildings that go all the way back to the history of this building. And that's what we firmly believe in, is that we need to take the best parts of downtown Windermere, this building, and these two new buildings, and then be consistent and complementary to the materials, the scale, and the design of those buildings. We've met all the other standards, the 80% coverage, to have the base bottom and top, we can do that. To have the amount of transparency, we can do that, the amount of glass on the front of the building. So that's why we didn't draw facades. Number one, it's Z1920. So if we end up with only 18,000 square feet instead of 21,750, all the drawings we have done, you can toss them. And to engineer everything at this point in time and spend all that money on hard engineering when you're still at Z1920, it's been our combined thought. It's just premature because you get the real bite at the apple next time, because Jim has spent some money on this effort and his partner. But the next step is very consultant, soft cost intensive. And that's where the money needs to be spent so that you can actually make it work rather than dealing with concepts and this and that. It's the next step is where the rubber and road meet. Next. So that's what we have to model off on the east side of the street now. We have a brick monolith and you have the old buildings, and they don't meet the town facade standards at all in any really report. But what they do offer is they offer some materials. The one on the right, Mark's building, you know, it probably meets the height standards and it has some brick on it. So maybe incorporating some brick since it's the building next door. Again, this consistency and complementing what's already there is important. And then the buildings that are just to the north, whereas they probably have an ample amount of glass, they're not tall enough, they don't have base body top, but you know, they just have kind of simple stucco facade. So we need to work through all those things after we figure out what Z1920 means. Next, please. So we've asked this way of facades. We've all dwelt on this for quite a while. And what it asks us to do, the actual words that are adopted, ask us to do, is promote diverse but compatible pedestrian-friendly architecture. That's what we're completely committed to create a sense of place. Well, we already have this wonderful sense of place. And just by preserving those trees on the main street, makes everything up. And what goes in behind it will then be this diverse, compatible, pedestrian-friendly architecture. It's not going to look like a shopping mall, other than it says we're supposed to do 20-foot storefronts. We'd like to do a few 20-foot storefronts, but then have the bookend buildings be a little bit more flexible with that so that they can really be the bookends and tie the architecture together. Particularly, you can, you know, the one on the south is going to be taller, so it's going to frame, and the one on the north, you can make the size appropriate. But it really does then book frame how all these facades tie together, and then it all works with the materials, and you have the transparency of the glass, you have the doors that front on the main street. That's what we're looking to do. So that's been our commitment since the spring of 19. And so we've drawn a plan that meets all those standards. First, you have to meet the comp plan. If we don't meet the comp plan, we should get thrown out. I believe we completely meet the comp plan. The buildings are placed where they're supposed to be, the parking is where it's supposed to be, the buffers are in place, we have the amount of height, we followed the parking space rules at 4 per 1,000. The town center design guideline facades really don't direct us to do much of anything. So that's why we went and used the most recently adopted things, believing that the town council, since they just recently approved them, would lean that way, thinking that, yeah, this is going to be consistent and complementary. So that's why we don't have facades. But that's why we put all the standards in the application so that we could document that we will be absolutely consistent with those town center design guidelines, because we have to come back to you. And I'm up here telling you this. I've been here for 33 years. And in the last 33 years, have I made hollow promises. And it's not really a promise, it's a requirement. And so that is, in fact, what we will do. Next, please. So we'd like to recommend approval. We'd like to get the grant those 2 waivers. I don't think the topography waiver is that big of a deal. I don't think town staff thinks it is either. We've explained in detail why the facade is just a little premature. And there's actually 2 things I'd like to talk about, the land uses and the trees. So if we could go to the next slide, we'll talk about land uses. Somehow, when you wrote your comp plan 17 years ago, it has these percentages in there that are town center district wide. It's not like our project has to have 30, 30, 20, 50. No, it's like the town center has to balance to that. Which, again, we have a building from 1955. Who knows how many different uses it's been over that time, which would then start to adjust all these different percentages. We're actually looking for anything that y'all could actually add to that discussion of how can it be such a stagnant number when we know that, particularly when this project turns out to be a wonderful success for the residents of Windermere, the uses are going to change over time. And how does it match into the static thing that we can't even control? Because if this turns out really well, some people like it, some people won't, there might actually be some more redevelopment from other parcels that will then, all these numbers will be changing. They're completely out of our control. And I just was looking really to tell you that and to see if you had any input. Next. Because this is what we've done. We hired a geographic information systems analysis, and he went through all the uses and did Orange County property appraiser and did SOR codes, and he did some other fancy things that he knows how to do in this machine. And we fit within all the categories. Will we in 4 years? And in 4 years, if the categories have changed, but everything's still working really well, how do you ever even police that? So again, that's just kind of open comment. We don't have any answers, but today we meet the standard. And then you can do this one. Oh, you can go to the next one. So everyone will be happy about this. Oh, no. So this is the discussion I was just talking about. 55, 67, and 75. The uses have changed over and over again. I just think that that's kind of an issue that you have this stagnant set of land uses in the regulations that just doesn't, in the long term, over 10, 20, 30 years makes sense. And then next. Okay, let's talk about the trees. That's beautiful. That's what you want to continue to have Main Street look like. So we've done our part, I believe, by hiring this 55 years of experience arborist that I've known for 25 years. And so this facade will look like that. And the edges on 6th and the edges on Oakdale that we can have some control over, most all those trees get saved. Is there a way to go back to like slide 8? There, nope, one more, go one more. One more, go back a little bit. One more, there, okay. When you come in from 6th Street, right there where the parking lot turns to go towards the building, that's where those 2 42-inch oak trees are that aren't more than this far apart. And so we got with Joe Samnick. And if you really want to preserve those trees, you'd have, first thing you have to do is you don't want to put in any curb, which is just another issue with the town that everything's supposed to have curb here. But if you start putting in curb and cutting the superficial roots, for trees that have been there for 150 years. That's an issue. You don't want to pave it because, again, air and water circulation cut off. So you need to do some type of pavers. And so could we craft, and have we tried to craft a way to save those 42-inch trees? We have, and it costs you a lot of parking spaces because the island gets to be like between 40 and 50 feet wide, not 12. And it kind of sits right in a really bad spot for circulation. And so are we still open to discuss that and talk about that? Did we go out and spend a bunch of money on someone helping us understand that, who has saved more oak trees in the state of Florida than anyone else? We did that, we've done that. And we're still willing to talk about it, but you go from 4 parking spaces per 1,000 to 3.5, which isn't really it isn't really that great of a savings, but that's why we keep trying to, in our brain, this is Z1920. This is setting the maximums and telling us this is exactly what we can have. And once we know that we put the building in the right place, and once we know that we're 4 spaces per 1,000, if we can actually find 87 spaces, we get 21,750. If it turns out we come up with 80 spaces, the square footage would go down proportionately. That's what we are really looking for out of Z1920. We've conformed with the comp plan, the buildings are in the right place. We've conformed with the comp plan, we have the buffer, we've committed to the wall, we've committed to landscaping it. We have the parking in the right space, we have a loading zone, and we have the dumpster in a very easy spot to get in and get out. We've committed to every possible standard that you have. We've actually doing this long enough. Some of your standards may not actually be what you want. So making everything 20-foot increments. So that's the end of my presentation. It's as much, we are looking as much for discussion with y'all as just, pounding our fist on the table and say, approve us. We've been at this a long time. This is going to be a legacy for the Carr family and for the town. And it needs to turn out really, really well. That's our goal, as stated right at the beginning of the presentation. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
The 42-inch oaks are just north of the 3-story section.
Please remember to speak into the microphone.
Right in here. So you're not talking
On this one, we took them out. Yeah. We had other plans to put them in. And then we talked to Joe Samnick, and what we're saying is, I think Carr would love to save them if at all financially feasible. What we don't want to do, this would be the worst possible thing, is to do a half-assed job of saving them, and then they die. And you have to spend $20,000, $30,000 to remove them. And now your parking's all screwed up, and you already got your zoning, so. But the 2006 plan does show the 42-inch oaks. Survey.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Hall?
I have a comment. I actually don't have a big disagreement with a lot of what you said. I think that this design guidelines and everything were developed a long time ago. They were developed really for the prior developer on the project to try to get some control over what was going on. And things change. I don't have a problem even with the trees, because I know we got plenty of trees and some of them are too close together and we just keep everything we can. And my issue is traffic.
Right.
And this also was not known 17 years ago. That Orange County was going to go completely out of control and build, and then decide that they weren't going to help the little town of Windermere and find bypasses, and they were going to create a traffic jam that is only going to get worse year by year by year. We will be bumper to bumper all the way down 6th Street, all the way down Main Street in a few more years. Not just during peak hours, probably. Your plan, as far as I can understand, is saying that we're going to add 560 new trips to this already out of control situation. It's like, unfortunately, Windermere isn't designed and situated in such a way to be a winter garden, a minor winter garden. We don't have that bypass. We don't have that colonial they can go down or some other street. They're not all forced down whatever the main street is there in Winter Garden. Plant Street, thank you. They are here. And even the people that aren't coming to your thing are all forced here. And now, so my issue is not what you're planning to put in, not what it's going to look like, although I think the septic thing is going to bite you in the ass anyways. But I don't think that we can take more traffic. Now, if you guys have a way of getting to Orange County and getting them to fix this issue, I'd be all for it. So that's my 2 cents for what it's worth, because that's why I can't get behind the project.
Well,
And I don't know how you can fix it.
well, this little project, it can't.
No. But I mean, you're taking us from 25,000 cars down the road a day to 26,000. You know, I mean, really, that's about it. But
Which, if you think of it respectfully, it is an increase.
Oh,
It's not that grand. But again, I go back, there's a comprehensive plan that's in place.
and I understand
It says
that.
we're allowed to ask for this.
Yes, and I agree with you, and I totally understand not wanting to spend a lot of money in design fees until you know whether the town's behind this, that you're gonna get approval. I get it. I've been in development a long time. I get it. I applaud you for doing that and not wasting your money. But I don't know how to fix this problem. It's just not a good location.
It's a great location. Except for people driving by.
Yes.
Anybody else left there?
Make some more comments? Okay. Just one comment, Jim Hall and I have worked together since before these trees were planted, I believe. And Jim's done a fantastic job for our team at Marriott, et cetera, so I have no complaints. My biggest problem now, Jim, is that plan. Everything you said, I agree with, actually. I have no problem with what you said. It's just that I can't find a loading dock on that plan. I can't find property lines on that plan. I can't find the dumpster on that plan. You know, and I have no understanding how a truck would get in and out of there, okay? Where you've got the buildings, I absolutely, great solution. You saved everything, you sent them back so much better than the last plan. But I wish you had taken the plan and actually shown the property line, shown the setback, shown the loading dock, shown the dumpster, and the things that, and even if it'd been great if you'd shown those trees that you may have to take out, but at least we would know where they were and what they were doing. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What I think is a reverting from residential to PUD zoning is what we planned forever. I don't think anybody's got that as an objection. It's been there since 2004. There are some people who don't know the plan, and we should educate them so that we don't get people in here with pitchforks and torches and come back with other plan. The other big concern I have is that you know, as you talked about here, the next step is when the costs come in. All these costs are coming in. And what I don't want to happen is you come in with all these finished costs, and we say, no, we don't like that elevation, or the town does, you know. And I just see this being very dangerous from your perspective, not ours, that you put everything in that last bucket without giving us a plan that even has a property line. Does that make sense? I don't want you to come back and say, we've got hardship, we spent thousands and thousands of dollars on this stuff, and we can't change anything yet.
Again, I'm being recorded. That won't happen. What I do think, some of the biggest concerns, I think that now we've been through this, people understand the building location. They understand how we conform to this town center guidelines. And we do, we absolutely conform. And so now the details, what I would think is, it's a two-part thing. We generally, you know, within a few feet, the buildings are set. And so there can be an architectural team that then starts to work on the facade. And maybe we can set something up with the town that there could be like a series of reviews with y'all come in every month. We've advanced it this far. Little feedback, okay, next month, a little bit more, because it's going to take to do the engineering is going to take months. So there is a chance that you can actually break this project kind of into two pieces. One is make it function as well as it can ever function and meet all the standards of the town and the state, because when it's a septic, it's really the state. But then the architecture and the facades, you're the front line. And so there needs to be, because we've gone and done this thing and said, we're not giving you any facades right now. We're telling you we're gonna do this. We've shown you all the details, we're committing to do that. You know, when we started this early, Stephen, and I learned a lot, we tried to do it with Brad, and we learned a lot, that I just can't walk up and down Main Street and say, it's gonna look like this building, this building, this building, because you don't have what you really want it to look like. Until now we have some plans. So Jim and his partner have talked this through. They really like some of the two proposed buildings, and they like this building. So that is the direction I think they're gonna start the architect off on, which hopefully is a nice benefit. So now you start to have the new town facility, the group of this building and that corner all now complement. But I would think having an iterative monthly process with you for at least certainly 2 months would really help bring this whole thing together. Because the engineering is the engineering. They come back and say, you're gonna lose 12 parking spaces for the septic. Well, the worst suggestion is that the Z1920, if we don't have 4 spaces for every 1,000, if we lose 4, we lose 1,000. If we lose 12, we lose 3,000. And we absolutely understand and are completely well ready to profit that and accept it.
Thank you.
Can I add something? Well, I have a question still, which Jim may better be able to answer. So in your next phase, how are you approaching this? My biggest concern is the septic, because it seems as if nothing's been done. Nobody's given any thought to it. Nobody's made any, I'm sure you have, but I'm not hearing any of that. So I hate approving a maximum if we know tonight it's unachievable. So why would we approve something that's not achievable? That's my problem with approving this tonight. So
The septic will be, because it's all the way to the state, so you're not getting around that. And where the give and take is going to take place is you can't put it in the storm pond, and you can't put it under the buildings. So there's the area that it's going to go. And if it turns out that you can't have some type of pervious paving, paver parking on top of it, the parking is going to go down. And our suggestion is that we're going to meet the 4 per 1,000. So if our septic tank takes out 10 parking, or takes out easier math, 12 parking spaces, we just lost 3,000 square feet. Because then what Jim can do is, again, it goes back to one of my early comments, is it's really the food and beverage. What type of restaurant? So if there starts to be a problem, what he'll have to make a business decision is, do you start to shrink that down? Because that's where all the septic issues are gonna come from. It's not gonna come from the relocated realty office. That just won't happen. It's gonna be the food and beverage. So again, from this, there's gonna be this give and take, this yin and yang to make that work. But where it's gonna have to go is primarily in the parking area. And if you can't park on top of it, if we lose spaces, we lose square footage. And so that's why it's a maximum based on the number of parking spaces you have. And if you can only achieve 50 parking spaces, then you only have 12,500 square feet.
Okay. So what is gonna be your process as you move forward? Are you gonna wait to hear from the state before you do your design work, or are you gonna design for 21,750 square feet? I mean, what if that all changes because you don't do your septic? Why are we, that's where I'm at. What are you gonna do next without knowing that answer? I mean,
Until you know how many square feet you have, you can't figure out the septic tank answer.
nor can you design a building.
Well, you can,
I mean, nor can you.
you can place buildings until you know you have 21,750 or 15,000. You can't do the finite design. And so this whole process of 2 years, we still, until tonight, we have a little bit more confidence that we're around 21,000 square feet. And if we base it on the parking spaces, 4 per 1,000, then we now have our window and envelope to go and do the hard engineering, do the hard architecture, do the geotechnical, get the septic tank, because there really aren't septic tank engineers anymore. You really have to go to providers. They're kind of the ones that design it, because almost all civil engineers, they just use, connect into the sewer, go to a lift station and set it away. So Jim will probably, if he has some, he has been dealing with the septic tank providers. I flushed myself out of that part of the project. So that's the real bottom line for Z1920 is if we can make it all work, it's 21,750. If we can't make it work, we're absolutely cognizant that it's going to do that.
Okay.
I'm assuming, Jim, that you have no tenants lined up at all at this point either. You know,
Wrong, Jim.
Jim Carr, I'm Tammy's husband here. Right now, we haven't started marketing to other tenants. I mean, we've got people that are always interested in the building if we ever do anything. Our existing tenants will come in back into the new building. So we don't have a specific tenant that we're building a space out for at this point in time. We don't know what we got to build. And,
just a question, because as Jim pointed out, the restaurant, food and beverage is going to be the biggest driver of most of the septic, which does parking, which is set. Can you, we know what the maximum square footage can be. We've already defined that. Rad's got that. Can we put some sort of maximum on the different pieces and parts, retail, commercial?
we put numbers on our plan. I think it was 11,000 for retail, 6,600 for 3,750 for something restaurant, which isn't a very big restaurant. And I have been talking to septic providers, and there's a lot of newer systems that are better than they used to be. So we're encouraged that we're going to be able to make that work. Our intent would be to do 21,750 if we can. There's several things that are going to, be in play on that. Drain field, I would love to save those big trees. It's going to be difficult, but I'd love to save them if we can. Does a half parking spot per 1,000 make up the difference? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But those are two things I'd really like to do. you know, what we're trying to do, and I've been talking about this for 10 years, is we need a starting point. We need to know that we're gonna be able to build X number of square feet, that's our maximum. And in order for us to do that, we've got to have a drain field system that works, we've got parking that works, and we meet all the other criteria that's required by the something falls short, our square footage goes down. And then I think as an option, you know, we need to look at, can we save the trees and does the reduce parking balance? So we've got things that have got to come forward. It's going to take more work on our part. We have done soil borings. We did them several years ago. We drilled down 10 feet, hit no water. We drilled down 20 feet, hit no water. So it's a great site for retention and drain field. So that's a positive thing for us. But, you know, we are getting to a point, our properties are getting old, we're either gonna have to start doing things to them, we'd rather rebuild them, make them new, make Windermere downtown a better place. And I grew up here, we used to have a gas station, we had a country store, we had a country store over here, we had restaurants, we had a post office. I don't think it's downtown like it used to be, you know, it kind of left. We get food truck events with 1,000 people here. We get the farmer's market. Most of those people aren't from Windermere. I'm seeing this commercial development. I don't see it attracting people from out of town. It should be the Windermere residents. So and that's I would love to have a restaurant that I can go eat dinner somewhere. You know, we go out quite a bit. We got to go to Sand Lake Road, Bowers Road, whatever, but I can't come down here and get much to eat. So I would really like to have the opportunity to get approval and let us go do all the work we need to do to see what we can actually develop on site.
Just a question, and I'd like to address this to John Fitzgibbon.
Joe boy. Yes, sir.
John, they're talking about a septic tank size on a field, and what they're showing is a stormwater retention area, no septic. Can stormwater retention go under parking like it's done on Main Street?
Yeah, I mean, there's options for that. And Jim, you've got that whole area over on the other side that you could do stormwater or septic.
Yeah,
And then look at the actual filtration system that we have out here in front of Town Hall. So I think from a standpoint of, do they have enough property to be able to achieve that? I think they do. It depends on how strategic they are with both their civil engineers and the health department and understanding what their options are, because there is exfiltration that can be done. And I do, for the record, want to know that I do support a level of development that you guys are talking about, but it also has to be responsible. We do have the 3.5 per thousand. That is a discounted rate if we look at mitigation. Right now, show what that mitigation is. I think that is important for the town residents that we at this level plan. Right now, you guys are at a cart and horse scenario. We're at the PUD level and getting ready to go to the CP level. So you guys are at the precipice of understanding how much this guy's going to invest in something to be able to show you what you can do or what you can't do. And so there's some point in time in which if he and you are going to pull the trigger to figure out how we move to the next level. And I will ask Jim, because he's a good friend of mine, right? You're a good friend of mine. Are you going to do this, or are you not going to do this development? Because I think that's important to the town, because we know him, but we don't know a future developer that might. And that's important as you guys make the decision to understand. And I had the luxury of being both an engineer consultant for the town as well as a resident of this town. And I love this guy. I've known him for years. But I also want to make sure that whatever you guys decide tonight is something that will ultimately move forward for the betterment of this town and the betterment of this town. And that's my little soliloquy. Thank you.
This is a comment, Jim.
This Jim or after
Jim.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, Jim Hall made a comment some time ago that most of your development is horizontal. and not vertical. We're hoping, as John said, that we take this thing vertical and change.
Well, I have a partner in this, which is MUSC. They live here, his family lives here, they don't live in Windermere. I don't ever plan to sell that piece of property. Now, when I die, you better ask me, but I don't plan to sell it. That's irreplaceable. Nobody else has property in Windermere. I love it. And I want to develop it. I'm not going anywhere. It's not being built so I can sell it to some investment fund that's going to return a profit. That's not the intent of this at all. But that's one of the reasons we haven't done anything to date, because it's been such an onerous process to try to get started. And we just said we leased it out, but I'm not happy with how it looks. I'm not happy, what it's doing. It needs to be improved, look better, and it'll be a good investment for us.
That's what we're hoping. Thank you.
But is it illegal for you to sell it in process?
Is it illegal?
Yes, sir. I understand. I'm Roger. I know I haven't lived in this town for 20 years. I do have children to get back to tonight, but I understand this is also important. I want to be respectful of your money and your time, but I also feel we should take a step back and say, as the board, what is our job? We have personal opinions of how we should spend our money. We have personal opinions about traffic, but those aren't our problems. Those are the town's problems. The town put forth a set of guidelines. What are we voting on tonight? Is it a requirement for the septic to be displayed tonight? I listened to all the presentations. They're not required. I would like to see some movement. I talk to a lot of people in this town. I have yet to find one person who does not like this idea of what's going to happen. And I believe I do represent the younger side of this town. I am 36 and I talk to everyone every day. You've all seen my signs up around town. It is important for the next generation of Windermere families, me and my wife and my kids, that we have a place to eat, that we have a place to drink, that I can take a golf cart to, or from my house I can walk to. I don't like the fact that you're telling me there's a pink, faded purple stucco building that was approved, and we're having a hard time. We're not the building department. We're not zoning. That's why we hired them. That's why we hired PUC, to make sure that they're within the codes and the setbacks. Now, I understand it's our responsibility to ask good questions, and I think we've asked good questions. But how long have you been in this process with this law? Estimate.
10 years.
10 years. As a member of the town, I find that to be unacceptable. There are codes and guidelines that are laid out for us to follow. And it's the same way as if you build your house. You have guidelines to follow. Part of the guidelines that were set upon me by, not Brad, but by the zoning of the state for the septics was for my house. I couldn't do a traditional septic system in the town, but there's an alternative. It cost me $17,800. But that's a personal decision that I had to make to develop my life for my house. And I feel those are your personal decisions that you have to make. But if we get to the point of this meeting, you suggested that you're meeting everything. At this time, we're not talking about variances. I've read the responses and I hear it from all the homeowners on Oakdale. But they're not the only ones that live in this town. There are lots and lots of other people. It's the same thing about the brew pub. There are certain people that like it. There are certain people that don't. How can we accommodate all without screwing you out of the land that you own and the investment that you can make? It's not a crime for you to change this to a pub and sell it tomorrow. Something could happen in your life next year that forces you to sell it. And what, we're going to call you a liar? It's none of our business, actually, if you sell the pond. Our job is to look at what is laid in front of us and to make a recommendation. And it's also to hear our neighbors. But at the end of the day, this board is not the town council. This board is not zoning. I love the comments from our guys, but we're not at that point. We don't need all this information. I'll be honest, I don't care about the 42-inch trees. I care about trees. But at this point, this meeting, this isn't about 2 42-inch trees. You've proposed a plan. You made a very good, discussion, Mr. Hall. I'm also in agreement that if you get 21,000 and, well, you got to back off some square footage for a drain field. Okay, but that's already solved in the code that's written. So, thank you for everyone tonight. I think at the end of the day, I just want to hear it from Brad Cornelius. Remind me one more time what it is that we're actually voting on tonight.
So the request before the DRB is to consider the rezoning of the property to PUD, consistent with the requirements of the comprehensive plan for development within the town center overlay district, as well as approving a preliminary development plan as part of that rezoning request. So that's before you this evening for the DRB to make a recommendation to town council with any condition you may see appropriate or any alterations that you see appropriate as part of your review.
With two waivers.
Thank you.
When we approve this, we're also approving it with the two waivers requested.
That is correct. The waivers and those are to the PUD requirements of providing a 1-foot topography and providing the facade standards. So the waivers, just so it is very clear, the waivers are not related to any of the design standards or the requirements. The waivers are just for the information that they are required to provide at this point.
Thank you for answering.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then-
I just have a quick question.
okay.
Jim, what is the minimum square footage below which the project cannot go forward?
I haven't really thought that out. We got about 8,000 feet now. So, there's got to be an economy of scale if we're going to build a parking lot and we're going to do all those improvements that we need there. I don't know the numbers. I really haven't thought it through. I mean, at the end of the day, if it gets too low, then we won't. But we 10 years ago, we came through with asking for a lot more square footage. We got the parking to fit. We did ask at that time to count some of the parking spots along the street that we use today. This application, we don't use anything on the street park. This is all being located on our site. So we've scaled it back. We were actually 30,000 square feet 10 years ago.
Do you know the vacancy of the new development off of McGuire Road in the town of Windermere? Is anyone familiar with the 4 new office buildings? Does anyone in here know the vacancy, how much space they have open?
Just so you're clear, the property is not within the town.
The one that's right outside the town, Park Ridge Gopher.
Right.
Does anyone know the vacancy of that? How much available space is available for rent?
I can only speak for one of the real estate agents that approached us stating that they were almost leased out and were looking to develop those acres next to Estancia for development that would be like kind to what's across the street. So yes, there is an interest.
So I met with them as well, in my understanding, and it's just what I hear is they were booked up immediately, and the only reason the ones that aren't really booked up right now is because they still had to be built out. But they have 2 legal pages full of people. We do have this pandemic. People are looking for office space that is close to home. I would love to find something that I could afford that would allow me to get out of the house with my 3 children who are under the age of 6, 4, and 1. I would love, it shows office space on the drawing. I would love to rent something like that. There's nothing else around here, and in these times where things have changed, not everyone has a big enough house just to work in their office at home. I think what you're proposing is fantastic. I get to eat, I get to drink and not drive, and I got an office space that personally would benefit me. But more importantly, the people that I talk to as I walk around this town every day, they're all saying the same exact thing. And I understand development is hard for some to swallow. But what we also have to remember is there are property rights in the state of Florida and in the United States. If you own your building, if you own your land, you have rights. You also have rights if you buy a lot next to a place that is future land use for commercial. The onus falls on the person acquiring the home. All the information of future land use is public knowledge. Everyone has the ability to see what future development comes. It's also the same way you have the right to call a general contractor to come look at your house or a home inspector before you buy it. But if you buy it as is, or you are the owner of something, you do not get the say of what happens on your neighbor's lot if it's within the town's codes and covenants. At least that's how I view that I control me and my family. You control you and your family. You submit something, and I think I have enough information to vote on it. And I appreciate your time, but I also apologize that for 10 years you've been trying to do this, and we still don't have a vote. It makes my head hurt that you're still standing here attempting to do it. It tells me that you love this town, and I appreciate that. I'm off.
Appreciate all that. I'd like to ask one question and go back to something that Jim Hall hit on briefly. And in this plan, we have allocated square footage for uses. Just because we felt obligated to do that. I have been very uncomfortable with that I would rather see them be, 50% retail, 50% office, up to, but not greater than, and say 30% retail, or restaurant, food and beverage. Is that allowable, and is that something you guys are entertaining, because it doesn't lock you in to such a box that you gotta fit in it? And that's something that I would like you guys maybe to think about, and if there was a way to offer up an amendment on that was acceptable to staff, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, I'm sure that's something.
I don't think that's an issue for zoning. I think what we're gonna do is your gross square foot's gonna be 21,750. And meet all the other standards, and that's what we would approve the zoning. I think what we're supposed to do is also review the preliminary development plan, and that's where I have a little bit of concern. So I agree with everything Jim Paul had. I don't see it on the plan.
Well,
I couldn't find a loading dock up there, he says it's there, but.
I saw it on the plan, and I saw the dumpster. It's hard to read it, but it's on the plan. And I mean, we really we need to have the ability to go do what we need to do. In order to do that, we've got to have a benchmark. This is the most we can do, and it could go down because we have things that restrict our uses. And that's what we're asking for. We want a target, and if we can't hit that target, we've got to figure out how close we can get to it. And then there'll be a couple alternative approaches that may be saving trees, that may not be saving trees. So, and there's ways that that's handled as well. So I would greatly appreciate y'all calling a vote and seeing if we
I would like to make sure that we give you the option of saving trees and reducing parking. I'd like to give you the option of maybe exfiltration system on the parking, whatever it is. I think that's fine. It's not going to drop in this plan.
right. Not at this level, the next level it will. And believe me, our intent is to try to get as close to 21,750 as we can, because it just makes more sense. But if it's, limited because of these things, we're going to try to find out how to maximize it. So.
Now, I want to just clarify one other thing. That 21,750 is gross. Yes, not net, because that we had a big problem with Mr. Zeus. He kept counting that. This is being presented as gross square footage.
What's your definition? I'm just
Under, basically under the facility,
Outside walls, right?
outside walls, under the walls.
Yeah, so we couldn't discount corridors and storage space or, you know, something up in the attic, you can't discount that.
And in a way,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add two quick things. Related to the parking and the trees, there is the ability and there's mechanisms in the code where Mr. Withers said that we can do alternative arrangements for parking to protect the trees. Because the priority isn't necessarily parking, the priority is protecting the trees there. So they can enter into agreement with the town, provide for off-site parking, they can do a fee in lieu of parking, you know, with that outcome of protecting more trees on the site. So there are mechanisms to help do that. That was the one point to bring up. The other point I'd like before you move on is we did receive an email from Ms. Roper, your member who's not here this evening. And she has some comments, if I may, she would like me to read this out, so everybody here. It is a short email, it's not very long. And Ms. Burkhalter has this email up for the record as well, she emailed it also. It says, Brad, I am out of town and not being attended tonight. I have reviewed the project plans and had no objections as it seems to follow the approved design guidelines that the town adopted in 2006, 2008. This is assuming that all traffic studies, et cetera, will show that our town will be able to support this much commercial use. My input is as follows. Number one, dumpsters be at the buildings and away from the residential. Number two, 1/5 or some percentage of the square footage be outdoor, covered and uncovered areas for gathering and aesthetics. Number three, to aim noise away from the residential area to the east. High-use businesses, restaurants, outdoor dining should not be on the rear parking side of the development. Number four, all lighting in the parking area should aim away from homes on Oakdale Street. Number five, the 20-foot border is for visual buffering of the parking area and should be vegetation of a manicured type and not bamboo. Thank you for taking this last minute input, Jennifer T. Roper, Town of Windermere, PRB member.
Thanks. Is there anybody else on the board have anything that hasn't really contributed at this point? I think everybody has. We would like to hear if we have some hands up in the audience. Or you want to come forward to the microphone and give your name and address.
Daniel Floyd, 515 Oakdale Street. If we could we bring up the page with the respondent survey that we were looking at before? Had the yes, nos. My home didn't, we responded to the survey, for some reason it wasn't on there, so I just want to make some comments. So while we're bringing that up, I'd say one of my top concerns being that when you're directly across from this proposed parking lot, a two-story home on Oakdale is the zoning. So the current proposal for 81 parking spots to rezone, what prevents and what legal recourse do we have if we change the zoning to commercial and in 5 years another developer purchases and decides to put a building up? What legal recourse do we have to prevent that? From my understanding, the rezoning laws work. Once we change the zoning, it's over. Like that's it. Like going from family use residential to commercial, there's nothing to prevent a new developer from putting up not a parking lot, but a building. So I'd like to hear from the applicant or any of the developers.
So we'll let Brad can address that, but this is, yeah.
Yeah, in response to the question, this is not a rezoning to commercial, this is actually a plan use development rezoning. And what that means is there are specific restrictions tied to the approval that run with the land. So say it were sold to another party, they are still subject to the conditions that the town would put on that development in terms of where the buildings could be, where the parking needs to be, the buffer, that can't be changed unless they come back through the process, come back through the public hearings and get it revised. So it's unlike a straight rezoning commercial that you talked about where, you know, we can rezone it commercial, it'll be one use and somebody come behind after and change it. This is not that kind of rezoning. This one, it has conditions tied to it that run with the property that can only be changed if it goes back through a public hearing process.
So the process would be similar to the microbrewery meetings that I attended. It would be conditional use.
No, well, it's similar but different. That's a conditional use. This is called a planned unit development. That for their property, they didn't have to go through rezoning. They went through a process to allow use that required a conditional use approval. This case, it requires rezoning for the planned unit development because it's in the overlay district. And it has conditions on it, similar to what happened with the West Edge, where it has conditions of.
Wouldn't you actually have to change the comp plan too?
Right, with the other project, they went through initially a comprehensive plan amendment as well as a rezoning, and then they came through with the conditional use. So,
All that work's already been done for this property. So all we're doing tonight is approving a site plan, a preliminary development plan, which is basically just a site plan.
Is it not a approval to go to town council for rezoning now?
yes, going to assign the PUD, that's a rezoning, to assign the PUD rezoning to the property. So again, but that the town council approved that PUD zoning is restricted only to the plans that go with that PUD. Nothing else can happen unless it goes back through a process to be changed.
Okay. So, yeah, so that brings me to my next question is, I saw a lot of top-down pictures. Being a resident, this second floor window will look down into this, a 6-foot wall with kind of shrubbery around what kind of landscaping we're looking at, or what kind of buffer zone we're looking at, isn't really helpful. So, it would actually be helpful if the applicant would meet with the town residents on a hotel and talk further on what the actual plans were to what that buffer zone would look like and what the wall would look like. You know, I'm not, I didn't meet, or I guess I didn't meet for this one for us. They would say no to anything, but it would be helpful if you could meet with the residents of both hotels to talk further along what this would look like. I'm directly across the street from the 516 hotel, that's going to be torn down, and whatever right across as well. So it'd be helpful to meet with you guys to see what you have in plan for the wall, the greenery, what the buffer zone looks like, what it looks like for the trees. I'm open to meeting with the developers as well.
I fully anticipate doing that. Once we go into the next step, and that's why we won't get through this one, because without knowing what we can do, you know, it's just wasting time and money and spinning wheels. But to move forward, we're gonna have to come up and actually have a design. I think the whole landscape design, everything will be done for the walls and the buffering. You know, to me, you might like a 6-foot wall, you might not like one, but we're required to build it by plan.
Yeah.
Now, we probably put a hedge and other things to buffer the wall. No bamboo. No bamboo.
The 6-foot wall is great if you have a single-story home, but the 2-story home doesn't really mean anything on the second floor.
Chairman, just so we get order, usually during public comment, they'll ask the questions, then we bring the applicant back up to answer those questions. Instead of a lot of back and forth in the background, and Dorothy's not gonna be able to take appropriate notes, so if you, remember the public can ask all those questions now, and we'll be able to go ahead and have a response.
So once Mr. Carr has his plan, Mr. Hall, we will probably be, I know we'll be hearing back from him, but I'm sure he'll be talking to the residents.
So being that this has been in motion for reading the agenda for over a year, and going back to 2004, the new resident who just moved in a year ago, how do we get involved in that plan? The first time I heard about it was 3 weeks ago when I got a letter in the mail. So how do we get advance notice of this, or how do we get involved?
All right.
All right.
You need to look at the town website, read the agendas of what's coming up in the future, and be aware of what's happening in the town. And this was all part of, I mean, all this stuff can be found through, you know, the muni code, all the stuff that we're talking about, these design guidelines that were established in 2004. That was a heart-wrenching experience for many people in this town. And so we've worked very hard on those design guidelines.
Gotcha. Where can I get access to those? Are they just on the website directly? Again, maybe for the town.
Specifically, they're available somewhere, but I can't tell you exactly where to look.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Welcome to Windermere.
We have one more.
Wait a minute, you had a statement originally, sir, about the yeses and the nos, you were.
Yeah, well, wait.
What?
Yeah, I was missing okay, so I'm between the two wins on Oakdale. I was in it as well, I guess for the record. I know, like Roger's comments about all around town, everyone saying yes to this. I invited him to my NextDoor thread, and it doesn't seem as supportive. But I definitely am not seeing yeses all around. So I think it's preliminary. As I said, I'm open to hearing more about it, but for the record, I was also no, I'm not sure why it wasn't counted. I didn't know that.
What I can say, is we generate that map for the Rocky sponsors, either the date of that map being generated, often we will receive responses after that map's been generated. So that could be the situation.
Okay.
What we do though between now and town council, we update the map with any one that came in after we generated information, to make sure it's up to date.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jim Muffner. I live at 411 West First Avenue. And I'm not living on Oakdale, where the people probably haven't lived here. This would be probably for the town. I don't know where you live, but where I live back here in that corner, people are absolutely appalled. This is not this. Just say that to them. I had a couple of questions. I'm going to piggyback on Ms. Rose. I have lived here 34 years, and I come through the town every day. I'm a school teacher now, and I have to go from Dr. Phillips Elementary to my home. And you're right, the traffic has gotten so bad since I've been here. It's appalling. We've had to close a couple of roads because people cannot get home. So I don't understand how you could possibly even consider 85 more parking spaces. Do you know how big a Starbucks is? It's 1,500 feet. A Wendy's is 3,000. So you're going to let them even think about putting that kind of development in our tiny town? I don't understand this. And I know my neighbors don't either. Because we do have to come through. We don't live on Oakdale. I'm so sorry for you people, I really am. I'm only thinking about myself. And your extra development outside of town, that makes my life going home even worse. Have you been to the pizza place down here? There is one, you know. Have you been to the coffee place? So all these people want more and more commercial development. Have you gone here? People have come and gone. So these last 33 years, places have come and gone so many times. And you know what the biggest complaint is? Windermere people will not shop there. So don't blame it on our shoulders. That you feel it's stagnant. Some of us feel like it's extremely charming, and that's what we bought here. And I'm sure a lot of you did. We love the ambiance of Windermere. It's quiet. My son grew up here playing in the streets of dirt. I wasn't afraid. Now I am. I have friends I can't visit across Main Street because the traffic is so bad, and they're afraid for their children. So maybe it's your younger generation, I get it, fine. But you know what? I am appalled. This development, that development, 535 has squished us to the death. And you want more. I really don't get it. I really don't. Because again, I can't get home anymore. I stay at work till 6 o'clock so I can avoid the traffic coming into my home. So I just want to bring that up. I'm sorry, Ms. Rose, I totally agree with you. Number two, it's ridiculous. If my kid in my classroom turned in a plan like that, I said, take it home and finish it. It's not done, and I would not accept it. So I don't really know why we're bending over backwards. Mrs. Hall, my husband worked with you many years, Mr. Hall, Mr. Lockwood did. So I expect better. You did so much. He worked with Mr. Hall many times. We did a deal with Mr. Gibbs. So I know who you're working with. And this is done on you. They're not gonna ram out counties. So I just want to let you know, that's how I think, and a lot of people in my corner are just horrified. They are really horrified.
Thank you. Okay, is that it from? All right. Go ahead.
Man, I just have two quick questions regarding the right in, right out, turning into the parking lot. I understand the concept. Would that mean the cars coming from the circle could not turn left into the parking lot, and if not, would that potentially increase traffic on Oakdale Street where they have to turn, hang a U-turn and come back in order to turn in right into the parking lot? You understand what I mean?
I understand. Okay, but Fifth Street has full access. So if you're coming to town, right in, right out, or if you want to go another direction, you need to go up to Fifth and then you go any way you want to go.
Right, and it wouldn't be accessible from Oakdale and Fifth.
It is not
parked
there.
there.
There's no access to Oakdale.
There's a park there. The traffic's not going to be spilling out onto Oakdale or Fifth Avenue. But my question is, if they come around the circle here and they want to turn into the park that way, or the parking lot, it's a thought. It's something that may potentially increase.
So, particularly after you've been there, I don't think that will happen. We want to do a U-turn on Sixth. You don't. You'll figure out that you can go up to Fifth, take a right, take another right, and get into the park.
Related to the right turn, maybe add to that as well. So part of why that has to be that way, that is a requirement of the downtown master plan. The downtown master plan has a condition, has a requirement that the access office space has to be a right in, right out. So that was part of that. The other part of that discussion is, and this is kind of part of the Kinley Horn review of the traffic study, is given the queuing that happens there, as we all does, it's not a safe movement if somebody's trying to make a left, say they're going eastbound out of town to try to make a left in there. That'll cause significant queuing coming back because you can't make that left.
Okay, so that basically, we're not going to be allowing people to turn left coming from this direction.
Correct.
All right. The other question is, I think that the Oakdale residents, obviously, the biggest resistance there is noise, lights, cars. How big is this dry stormwater area? It seems to be concentrated on the north half of the block. Is it possible to spread that out so that it runs the whole entire length of the block, thereby increasing the buffer space from 20 feet to maybe 40 feet or something of that nature? I know it's kind of a rhetorical question at this point, but that might help with some of the Oakdale residents if you had a much wider buffer. But
There's 2 points there. One is it's actually been drawn conservatively large.
I'm sorry, can you speak up again?
It's been drawn conservatively large.
Now, I'm talking about the placement.
Because it has to, with 20 feet to groundwater, there's the opportunity when you have a civil engineer. I'm not a civil engineer, I'm a community planner. So I took just the basic standards because I knew it was conservatively large. We didn't want to hoodwink this board in the town and draw it real small and get 100 parking spaces and never then be able to make it work. So we drew it conservatively large. The reason it doesn't go north and south along Oakdale is because it has to be landscaped. So when you landscape the buffer, you can't really put plant material in a retention area because, in the summer, it's just gonna, whereas it's dry, it'll drain, it'll be dry after 24 hours of drainage. There will be times when it stays wet, and so then that plant material, what you can use, is really limited and it probably doesn't thrive and flourish. So we decided to keep all that stuff out of the buffer and show a dedicated area that you can see it's over 20% of the site. And we did that because, again, this whole septic question, so let's make it large. The geotech came in after we had drawn it. So now that we know it's 20 feet deep, that'll be very good news for the civil engineer.
So my question was, could it be spread out along the entire length of Oakdale Street, potentially, to increase the size of the buffer? The visual buffer or the perceived buffer for the residents on Oakdale?
No, because it has to be landscaped. I don't believe we can landscape with shrub material and have it grow and thrive and flourish.
And stormwater areas, think of all the storm areas you're seeing in Central Florida, they don't have plants. They're grass. You got some trees, you've never seen them. Thank you.
Did you say it would be that this summer? It says dry, so it's
Whatever we brought, an hour after it rained, we lose some water. Yeah, it's 20 feet down to the ground, so it would drain.
okay.
I make a motion to approve. Zoning with the two waivers.
I'll second. Any other discussion from the council?
Yeah, I feel like I should respond on the record. I feel the anger towards me for what I said. I feel like a lot of the people that show up at these meetings are the people who are anti. I'm just speaking for other people. I never said everyone in the town of Windermere is on board for this. So I don't want anyone to put words in my mouth. I never said I was in favor for it. I simply expressed as a member of your community who has volunteered his time to sit up here, who takes an interest in this stuff, that we have a job to do, and it's not based on personal opinion or vendetta. I'm just expressing that I've spoken to people who are in favor for it. And I'm sorry for your troubles or that I even caused you to go there. That's not my intention, but I do feel like someone has to stand up at some point and say there are codes and there are rules that govern this. And I'd like to vote on what we're really called here today for. So my apologies to you if I misspoke and said everyone in the town wants it. That's on the record.
I think we have a motion on the floor. And any other discussion needs to be from the board concerning this motion. So is there any discussion?
I will say that I'm gonna vote for it, but I wish we'd had a better plan and labeled everything that was on there.
Understood. I agree too. I look forward to seeing the final, well, the next step. So, all right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
No.
Okay.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all we have. Yeah, can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll second it.
We're good. Gotcha.
We good?
Yes.